Hi, my name is Tiffany. They said it wasn't personal, just a promise, a vow my father made to my sister before he passed. So while she got a brand new car for graduating, I got my surgery canceled. The one thing that could have kept me out of the hospital. No one told me. They smiled through it. Took pictures in front of the ribbon-wrapped car while I sat upstairs clutching an appointment letter that meant nothing anymore. They said I was dramatic, said I'd understand when I had kids of my own. But tell me, when your family decides someone else's dream matters more than your health, what are you supposed to do? What do you do when family doesn't mean you? The walls of the hospital waiting room always made me uneasy, too sterile, too silent, like they were keeping secrets from the people sitting beneath their flickering lights. I sat there wrapped in the stiff, pale blue hospital gown, feet dangling slightly above the floor, the chill of the plastic chair biting through my skin. Outside, late winter sun filtered through slatted blinds. It wasn't quite spring in Boise yet, but you could feel the shift coming, the way the air hinted at something softer. I glanced up at the wall clock again, 10 minutes past the scheduled time. I figured the delay was normal. Hospitals ran late all the time. Still, my palms were sweating and my stomach twisted. Not from the surgery, but from something deeper. I'd been putting this off for months, but the discomfort had grown unbearable. I needed this procedure. My phone buzzed in the side pocket of my folded jeans, and I reached for it quickly, thinking it might be the nurse. It wasn't. It was the hospital billing office. "Miss Abbott?" The woman's voice was polite, practiced. "I'm calling about your procedure today. I'm afraid we have to cancel it." There was a pause, as if she expected me to say something, maybe thank her for the update. "I'm sorry, what?" I finally stammered. "There was a change in insurance status. The copay authorization was withdrawn. We can't proceed without it." "That's not possible," I said, sitting upright. "The insurance was approved weeks ago." "Yes, ma'am. The file shows that. But the primary account holder canceled it this morning." I felt the blood drain from my face. The primary account holder. That was my mother. I didn't ask more. I didn't shout. I just hung up, stood in that frigid room for a few seconds longer, and then changed back into my clothes with mechanical precision. My hands shook slightly as I zipped up my jacket. I was too numb to cry. The car ride home felt longer than usual. The icy roads didn't help, but neither did the storm inside my head. I tried to come up with rational explanations. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe the system glitched. Maybe Mom had called to update something and it got misread. Yeah, maybe. But I already knew that wasn't it. When I walked into the house, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a mug of tea and flipping through a Better Homes magazine, like she didn't just throw a grenade into my life. "Why was my surgery canceled?" I asked, standing in the doorway, coat still on. She didn't look up. "Oh, sweetheart. About that." I waited. My heart pounded in my ears. "We needed the funds redirected this month. Isolde's graduation gift. It's her moment, Tiffany. And it was your father's promise to her." I blinked. "You took my surgery money to buy her a car?" She finally met my gaze, eyes calm, voice like she was talking about rearranging furniture. "It's not just a car, it's symbolic. He promised her when she was little that when she graduated top of her class, she'd get her own vehicle. He made that vow, and I honored it." I could feel something tearing inside me. "So your solution was to cancel my procedure, without telling me?" "You've always been dramatic about medical things," she said, sipping her tea. "You've managed this long, haven't you?" "That's not the point. It's not like we're letting you die. It's just delayed." The front door opened. Isolde's voice echoed through the hallway. "Did it come?" she called. Mom stood up with a bright smile. "Out back, under the tarp, they just delivered it." Isolde appeared in the kitchen, perfect as always, tall, glossy, glowing. She gave me a brief glance, then turned to Mom. "Can we go look?" Neither of them asked me to come along, not that I would have. I walked slowly upstairs and closed my bedroom door. I didn't cry, not yet. My body went cold the way it does when you've heard something cruel but haven't processed it yet. I sat on my bed and tried to remember the last time my needs were considered first. The answer didn't come. Dad used to say, "We honor our word, no matter the cost, even if the cost was me." That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept waking up and staring at the ceiling, replaying the call, her face, that phrase. It was your father's promise. By morning, snow flurries danced across the backyard. From my bedroom window, I saw the red car, brand new, shiny, with a big white ribbon. There was a gold plaque attached to the front grille that read, "Dad's Promise." Vera stood next to Isolde in her cap and gown, snapping photos. They laughed. Champagne flutes glinted in their hands. No one called me down. No one looked up. I stayed behind the curtain, fingers pressed to the glass, heart like wet paper. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt invisible. At some point, I picked up the crumpled letter confirming my surgery appointment, folded it twice, and held it in my palm. A few moments later, I squeezed it into a tight ball and dropped it into the trash. "I get it," I whispered to no one. "Vows matter more than people." I stayed in my room long after the last laugh from the driveway faded. The clink of champagne glasses, the camera shutter clicks, the soft rumble of congratulatory small talk, it all quieted down eventually. But the silence they left behind was even louder. I didn't even peek through the blinds again. I just sat there, elbows on knees, hands clasped tight, staring at the floor like it held answers I had missed my entire life. It wasn't just the car. I knew that. It wasn't even just the money. It was the message, clear, gleaming in metallic red paint, wrapped in a bow, immortalized in a photo album I wasn't part of. That car was a monument to what I had always feared, that no matter how much I endured, how quiet I stayed, how responsible I tried to be, I would never be the one who got chosen. Isolde's graduation came a few weeks later, late spring. I sat alone in the back row of a massive auditorium at Boise State, watching her name light up on the projector above the stage. Everyone around me cheered. I clapped too, just to keep my hands from trembling. They had reserved a seat for me, row 2, front and center. I saw it when I first walked in. My name had been printed neatly on a card, but by the time I returned from the restroom, it was gone. I asked Mom about it. She smiled gently, like I was making a fuss over nothing. "Oh, we shifted things around for the family photo zone," she said, brushing a crumb off her blazer. "The crowd's tight down there. We didn't want you caught in the camera flash." The way she said it, soft, polite, felt like someone gently closing a door on my face. I didn't fight it. I just walked quietly to the very back, where the folding chairs creaked and no one asked you who you were there to support. From my seat, I watched Isolde cross the stage, tossing her cap high into the air, her long curls bouncing, her smile as flawless as it was when she was 8 and won the county pageant. Dad had driven all night back then to make it to that event. My science fair ribbon sat on the kitchen table that weekend, untouched. Later that afternoon, still dressed in my slacks and flats, I sat in the parking lot with the windows down and my phone in hand. A post from Mom had just gone live. "She did it. Dad's promise fulfilled," the caption read. There was Isolde, standing proudly next to the red car. The ribbon still intact, the gold plaque, Dad's promise, gleaming in the sun. The comment section lit up. "She's everything a daughter should be. Your husband would be so proud. What a blessing." I read them all. Then I read them again. And then again. A strange stillness settled in my chest. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised. But something inside me shifted, like the floor had quietly moved beneath me. I closed the app and started the car, driving nowhere in particular. I ended up in front of the community center, where the ceremony program was taped to the glass for anyone to see. I walked up, squinting against the light. My name wasn't on it. Under immediate family of graduate, it listed only, Mother, Vera Kincaid. I stepped inside and found a clerk by the front desk. She was young, typing quickly, polite when I asked about the printing. "Are you sure that's correct?" I asked. "I'm her sister." She looked over her shoulder and checked the screen. "We thought she was an only child." I didn't respond. After a few seconds, she tilted her head slightly. She acted like one. That night, I lay on my bed, fully dressed, phone on my chest, not asleep, but not quite awake either. A memory played in my mind without invitation. Age 10. My first science fair. I had built a working model of the water cycle using plastic tubing and colored beads. It wasn't fancy, but I did it all myself. I was proud. I even won an honorable mention. Dad glanced at the ribbon, nodded once, then left it on the counter. That same week, Isolde got a Best Smile award in her class. A vinyl banner was ordered. They strung it across the porch. I remembered how they clapped when she showed her certificate, how Mom hugged her, how Dad said, "That's the kind of recognition that sticks with people." That's when I first learned effort didn't mean attention. Dad's words echoed now, the same line he used whenever things felt unfair. "She'll carry the family name. You'll be fine." I'd grown up learning that fine meant silent. Fine meant not needing. Fine meant forgettable. Lying there in the dark, I finally opened my phone again. I found the photo Mom posted, the car, the caption, the endless stream of comments. And then, without blinking, I tapped Save Image. Not to treasure it, to remember what it looks like to be erased. I stared at that picture like it was a grave marker, a perfectly polished headstone for the version of me who waited to be included. "I was never supposed to be in the picture," I said aloud. The room didn't argue. It never did. I stayed awake long after the photo disappeared into my phone's memory, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't want to. There was something sobering about choosing to feel it all, every sting, every silence, every glance away that had piled up over the years. I lay there thinking about how many moments I had convinced myself didn't matter. How often I had told myself, they didn't mean it that way. But when a pattern repeats enough times, you stop calling it a coincidence. I sat up slowly and walked across the room to my dresser. The nightlight cast soft shadows on the wall. I pulled open the bottom drawer, reaching toward the very back where I had shoved old envelopes, school reports, and loose photo prints over the years. I hadn't looked at them in forever, but I knew exactly what I was searching for. Down in the basement, I found the box. It was a beat-up storage bin tucked behind old holiday decorations and half-used paint cans. I wiped a layer of dust off the lid and hauled it upstairs, one step at a time. Sitting on the living room floor, I opened the bin and was hit with that familiar scent of time, faded paper, old wood, a hint of mildew. Inside were dozens of photo envelopes, some with sticky notes that said things like Disney 2007, Lake Trip, or Isolde's 5th grade awards. I started sorting them into piles, letting my fingers skim over each one. In picture after picture, Isolde beamed in the center of the frame. Birthday hats, family vacations, Christmas mornings, all choreographed perfectly around her. And me? If I was there, I was usually off to the side, blurred in motion, or looking away from the camera. In one photo, I was handing a slice of cake to our neighbor's son, while everyone else posed with Isolde and her new dollhouse. In another, I stood behind the grill with Dad, but only his hand made it into the frame. I finally found what I didn't know I was looking for, a picture from my 4th grade spelling bee. I had placed second and won a ribbon that I was embarrassingly proud of. In the photo, I was holding it up with both hands, eyes bright, smiling wide. But the image told a different story. I was standing at the edge of the group. No one else was looking at me. No one else was even in the photo. Just me, slightly out of focus, ribbon crooked, and that faint hint of hope in my eyes. I sat there for a long time, holding that picture. The paper had curled over the years, and the ink had begun to fade. Still, it was proof. I had been there. I had tried. I had wanted someone to notice. Later that evening, we had dinner together, if you could call it that. Mom reheated a frozen lasagna and set out paper plates. She talked about Isolde's graduation, how elegant the ceremony was, how many people complimented her speech. Everyone kept saying how poised she was, Mom said, scooping more food onto her plate. She's always had a presence, Isolde added, her voice smug but sweet enough to pass as modest. I didn't speak. I chewed slowly and kept my eyes on the salt shaker. No one asked how my day had been. No one noticed when I stood up, took my plate to the sink, and walked away. The chair made a sharp screech across the tile, but neither of them flinched. In the hallway, I paused and glanced back at the table, my chair still slightly askew, an empty plate the only proof I had existed there that night. I went up to my room, sat at my desk, and stared at the pile of old pictures. I was about to put them away when I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. A knock followed. "Tiff, can I come in?" Mom asked. I didn't answer, but she opened the door anyway. She was holding a white envelope. "Isolde wrote a thank you note to Dr. Melvin," she said, placing the envelope on my desk. "Would you like to sign it?" I looked at her, stunned. "Sign it? Well, for the family, to show our appreciation." I blinked. "Did you tell him I was supposed to have surgery?" Her expression didn't shift. It didn't seem relevant. The surgery didn't happen. I stared at her. She really didn't hear herself. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. Tiff, it's not healthy to hold on to things." I waited until she was gone before opening the letter. It read, "To Dr. Melvin, thank you for helping us honor our daughter's milestone. She has always made us proud, and we're grateful for your role in her journey." No mention of me. No acknowledgement that the surgery had been scheduled, then pulled. Nothing to suggest anyone else existed in this house but Isolde. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. That night, I couldn't shake the words from my head. She has always made us proud. 10 years ago, I was hospitalized for the first time. I was 14, and I had fainted in gym class. It turned out to be a blood sugar drop they didn't catch soon enough. I spent 2 nights in the pediatric wing, hooked up to a monitor. Dad sat outside in the hallway with his laptop, working on a speech for Isolde's student council campaign. Mom brought me a book, but she left before I opened it. "She needs to build resilience," she told the nurse. "She's too sensitive. Let her figure this out." I remembered lying in that bed, watching the shadow of my father's shoes under the door. He never came in, and I never asked why. I didn't want to be the problem child. I didn't want to be the burden. I just wanted to be enough without asking for it. Back in the present, I took the old spelling bee photo and placed it on my dresser next to a small lamp. It didn't fit in the frame, so I leaned it against the side. The image was faded, the edges water-stained, but it was mine. "You were always there," I whispered, staring at my own younger eyes. "Just not seen." The quiet voice inside me didn't stay quiet for long. It grew louder each morning, whispering when I poured my coffee, humming in the background as I brushed my teeth, echoing even in the silence of my room. "You deserve more." I heard it when no one was speaking, and even louder when they were. It was a Tuesday when I ran into Mina. I hadn't planned on going to the campus clinic that day, but my head had been pounding since the night before. Not a migraine exactly, just that tight, squeezing kind of ache that creeps up your neck and camps out behind your eyes. Stress does that. Living in a house where you're more furniture than family does that. The clinic lobby smelled like old coffee and pine-scented cleaning spray. I checked in and took a seat, flipping absently through a dog-eared magazine. Then I heard a voice say my name. Not Miss Avett, not patient, but my name the way people say it when they know you. "Tiffany?" I looked up. It took me a second to place her. Mina. We had shared AP Bio in high school. She had sat 2 rows over, always with colored pens and a notebook full of perfectly spaced notes. Now she wore scrubs, her badge hanging from a lanyard, her hair tied up in a loose bun. She smiled and tilted her head. "Wow, it's been a minute." I nodded, standing. "Yeah, it has." We caught up in that easy, familiar way you do when someone from your past shows up in a different season of your life. She was doing her nursing residency here, had just transferred back from Portland. I told her about my part-time job at the library, about trying to finish my coursework. I didn't mention the surgery. She noticed, though. She looked at me a little too carefully. "You okay?" she asked. "You look tired." I hesitated, then laughed. "It's been a weird couple of months." Mina didn't push, just waited. I sat back down. "I had a surgery scheduled a few weeks ago. Nothing huge, Just needed. It got canceled. She frowned. Insurance? Apparently. She shifted on her feet. Was it through the state grant program? The one for dependents of deceased veterans? You qualify, right? Your dad served, didn't he? I blinked. Yeah, he did. She nodded. That program only needs parental consent if you're still listed under their coverage. Otherwise, they greenlight it fast. I process those all the time. I didn't answer right away, because the pit in my stomach told me exactly what had happened, before I even went home to check. That evening, after dinner, another round of silent lasagna and a dozen Isolde stories I didn't respond to, I sat on my bed and opened my old email account. I had created a draft for the grant months ago. I remembered showing Mom. I remembered her exact words. I'll handle it. Focus on school. The draft was still there, unsubmitted, untouched. I clicked through the attachments. The form required a single signature from a parent or legal guardian. I stared at it, my hand frozen on the mouse. Then I stood, walked downstairs, and out to the porch where the evening breeze carried the scent of wet grass and exhaust from the neighbor's truck. I called Mina. Do you still have access to the hospital consent logs? I asked. She paused. Technically, no. But I remember something weird about your file. Hold on. 3 minutes passed, then she was back. Your mother declined the grant on your behalf. Wrote that you'd be covered privately. My throat went dry. She never told me. She shouldn't have been allowed to do that without a conversation, Mina said gently. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went back upstairs, sat on my bed, and cried. Not from shock, but from the insult of it all. I wasn't invisible. I was being deliberately pushed aside, and they didn't even have the decency to admit it. The next morning, I called Dr. Melvin's office. The receptionist sounded familiar, brisk but polite. Yvette, let me pull you up. There was a pause. Looks like the last procedure was canceled by the primary insurance holder. I know, I said. I'm 25 now. Can I reschedule under my name? She hesitated. You're still on the family plan. We'd need either a full switch or consent from the account holder. But I'm legally an adult. Insurance doesn't always play by logic, she said with a tired laugh. It's bureaucracy. Can I at least pay the copay myself? If the insurance refuses to authorize it, it won't matter. You'd have to fully opt out of their policy first. I hung up before she finished her sentence. That afternoon felt like walking underwater. Everything moved, but nothing touched me. I went through motions, work emails, dinner, laundry, but it was background noise. My thoughts were elsewhere. After the dishes were washed, I walked into the kitchen. Vera was reading at the table, her glasses perched on her nose. Isolde was on her phone, one leg draped casually over the arm of the sofa. I need to talk to you, I said, standing just past the doorway. Neither looked up immediately. I found the grant application, I continued. That got Vera's attention. You blocked it, I said. She looked confused for a beat, then calmly put down her book. Tiffany, it wasn't the right time. I stared. It was the only time. We had other priorities. You mean her priorities? Don't twist things. Don't hide things, I snapped. Isolde glanced up, rolled her eyes, then returned to scrolling. Vera sighed, picked up her book again. You'll understand when you have kids. I stood there another moment, then turned and left the room. Later that night, in the safety of my room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the grant site again. My fingers hovered over the keys. A single line caught my attention beneath the signature box. If you're on your own, we'll help you start over. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I hit download. The words glowed on the screen like a challenge. Submit. Just one click away. My hand hovered over the trackpad, uncertain for a moment, not out of fear, but out of disbelief that I was finally doing it for myself. I hadn't even realized how many years I'd spent asking for permission to exist, to need, to be taken seriously. You always said I needed to fight for myself, I whispered under my breath. But he never meant against them. Downstairs, the murmur of TV voices and silverware clinks traveled faintly through the walls. It was early evening, the kind of spring dusk where the light turns soft, almost forgiving, but I wasn't in the mood to forgive. I left my room quietly and made my way to the family room, where Malcolm's framed photo still hung above the fireplace. It had been there since the funeral. His smile was stiff, formally captured in a suit he never wore in real life, and his eyes didn't seem to follow you so much as they watched the room like a security camera. Watching everything, doing nothing. I stood in front of the portrait for a full minute before speaking. "Was she really your only promise?" I asked aloud. My voice didn't tremble. It landed solid, like a stone against water. The room remained silent. I didn't expect answers. "You always said a man keeps his word. You made that sound so noble. But what about the words you never said? What about the ones you let Mom twist into a banner for Isolde and a muzzle for me?" I stepped closer, almost close enough to touch the frame. "I wanted you to be proud too, but I guess that was never part of the vow." Later that night, Vera called a family meeting. She didn't call it that, of course. She called it a check-in, which was her code for, "I need to remind everyone who's in charge." We gathered around the kitchen table. She sat at the head like always, fingers laced tightly over a folded napkin, lips pressed in that faux serene way she did when she wanted to seem in control, but was 1 second away from snapping. "This house runs on respect," she began. "And lately I feel like that's being lost." I didn't respond. Neither did Isolde, at first. Vera continued. "We all go through things, but this passive-aggressive tension, it has to stop. It's exhausting. I can't keep walking on eggshells." "You've never walked on eggshells a day in your life," I said, barely above a whisper. Isolde rolled her eyes. "Here we go. You act like everything is against you." I turned to her. "Because it has been, for years." "You always find a way to make things about you," Vera snapped, the mask slipping for a second. I leaned forward slightly. "You canceled my surgery. You declined a grant that would have paid for my medical care. You removed my name from the graduation materials, told the world I didn't exist." Vera cut in. "Oh, come on, Tiffany, that's not fair. That was a misprint." "No, it wasn't," I said. "You made me invisible. On purpose." Vera's voice sharpened. "Honestly, Tiffany, you've always played the victim." That was the moment something broke open in me, not with fury, but with clarity. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with a soft scrape. "You think I enjoy begging for help?" I asked, looking at both of them. Vera blinked, caught off guard by my tone. "You think I want to stand in this house year after year, watching my needs get erased? You think I'm just sensitive?" I paused. "Maybe I am. But maybe that's because I've been bleeding and you kept calling it a scratch." Isolde leaned back, arms crossed. "Maybe you're just not built for pressure." I turned toward her. Or maybe I was never allowed to rise. They didn't respond. I didn't wait for them to. Later, back in my room, the world finally felt still. Not better, not resolved, but still. I reopened my laptop, found the grant form, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I filled in the last field, double-checked the attachments, and clicked Submit. The confirmation email arrived instantly. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled fully. I opened a new document and titled it, Everything They Never Said, and I began to type. I wrote about the day they bought a car instead of refilling my prescription. I wrote about the graduation ceremony and the way the seat with my name disappeared. I wrote about the dinner table and the silence that screamed louder than any argument. But I didn't write as someone broken. I wrote as someone building. When I finished the first page, I printed it out and walked back downstairs. The house was quiet. TV off, kitchen dark. I stood once more in front of Malcolm's photo. I placed the page beneath the frame and looked him in the eye for the last time. "I don't need your promise anymore." By the time the video had been live for an hour, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't walk back from. And I didn't want to. It wasn't defiance for the sake of drama. It was clarity. Pure, unfiltered truth. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't accused. I just laid it out like it was. Dates, receipts, screenshots, silence. The next morning, I woke to the scent of toast and the unmistakable sound of laughter downstairs. It was the kind of bright, fake laughter I recognized well. Isolde's voice a little too high, Mom's laugh a little too forced. They were celebrating something. Again. I didn't bother asking what. Instead, I rolled over and checked my phone. Notifications blinked across the screen. Comments, shares, likes, a few messages from unfamiliar names. But what caught my attention wasn't the new. It was the old. I opened my voicemail log, scrolling through the past month. There it was. March 11th, 2:03 a.m. A call to Vera's phone. Duration, 1 minute, 12 seconds. Status, read. I remembered that night like it had been stitched into me. The pain in my side, the rising fever, the way my voice cracked as I left the message. Mom, I think I need help. I don't feel right. Please call me back. She never did. I didn't think. I just walked down the stairs, phone in hand. The sun was slanting in through the kitchen window, glinting off the countertops. Vera was slicing fruit. Isolde was perched on a bar stool, sipping something green out of a mason jar. I held up the phone. You heard my message, I said. Vera looked up. What message? March 11th, 2:03 a.m. You opened it. She stared at me for a beat, then gave a small shrug. I assumed you'd figure it out. You always bounce back. Is that what this is? I asked. You ignoring me and calling it resilience? I didn't ignore you, she said, calmly. I just thought you'd handle it. Like last time. There was no remorse in her tone, just a hint of irritation, like I was dragging an old conversation into the kitchen while she was preparing brunch. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say anything dramatic. I just left because there was no conversation to be had. 2 hours later, Vera knocked on my door. She didn't come in. She never did unless she needed something. We're putting together a short video for Isolde's brand launch, she called through the door. She's working with a new sponsor. We thought it would be nice if you said something kind. Just a short clip, 1 line maybe. Isolde's voice followed behind, too cheerful to be real. Just say something like, I've always admired my sister's drive. Nothing too complicated. I opened the door and looked them both in the eye. Sure, I said. 1 line. They smiled, like I'd handed them a gift. Back in my room, I didn't bother setting up lighting. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't put on makeup. I just sat on the edge of my bed, hit record, and stared straight into the lens. My name is Tiffany Avett, I began. My voice was steady, even. I'm the daughter whose medical care was canceled so her sister could get a graduation car. I laid it all out, briefly, clearly. I gave dates. I showed a screenshot of the hospital message. I explained the voicemail, the insurance revocation, the blocked grant. I'm not looking for sympathy, I said. And this isn't revenge, it's truth. Because people don't always scream when they're hurt. Sometimes they just disappear. And sometimes they come back. I uploaded it. Not to YouTube, not to TikTok. I sent it to a local patient advocacy page on Facebook. Then I closed my laptop and went downstairs. The house was quiet. Vera and Isolde had left for the day, probably a brunch, a meeting, something that required matching coats and Instagram captions. I made a cup of tea, sat in the backyard, and waited. At first, nothing happened. 20 views, then 30, a couple of shares, 1 comment from a nurse in Twin Falls. This, so much this. Then a repost by the advocacy group. That's when it shifted. By dinner, the video had passed 10,000 views. By midnight, 40,000. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. People from across the country messaged me, nurses, patients, strangers who'd been through the same thing. I was you. My sister got everything. I got scraps. My mom said I was strong so she didn't have to show up. Every message was a mirror, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the reflection. The next morning, I stood by the window, sipping coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. The air outside was still. Birds chirped faintly from the power lines. From downstairs, Vera's voice rose. "We need to talk." I didn't turn. I didn't move. I just said loud enough to carry down the stairs. "Then talk loud. I'm not hiding anymore." The knock at my door was sharp, frantic, nothing like the usual rehearsed tap Vera used when she wanted to appear composed. This was different. There was no delay this time, no pause to wait for my permission. The door swung open, and she stood there with fire behind her eyes. "You have no idea what you've done," she said through gritted teeth. I looked up from my desk slowly. The printer beside me was still humming, a second batch of emails coming through, messages from strangers who'd watched the video. Nurses, social workers, daughters like me. "Correction," I said, rising from my chair. "You had no idea what I could do." She didn't respond. Her mouth opened, then closed, and she left the room without another word. That morning felt different. The usual stiffness in the air was gone. It had been replaced by movement, constant, anxious footsteps, raised voices from downstairs, phone calls answered in hushed tones. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't in years, but not in a good way. It felt threatened. I stepped into the hallway, passing Isolda's room. Her door was ajar. I could hear the unmistakable tone of panic in her voice. "No, I didn't know she'd post it," she said to someone on speaker. "It wasn't planned. I've already emailed them, okay? Please, don't drop it yet. Just give me time to fix this." A few hours later, I sat in the kitchen scrolling through TikTok when I saw it. A creator with over 500,000 followers had duetted my video. She looked straight into the camera. "You want to talk about family neglect? This is it. Tiffany didn't just get overlooked. She was erased." The hashtags took off almost immediately. "Dad was wrong. Tiffany deserves more. Medical neglect is real." Comments poured in. "She's every youngest daughter who was told to be quiet. My parents did the same to me." This is abuse, not just emotional, legal. By early evening, the local news was sniffing around. I hadn't returned any calls yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Then came the explosion. Isolde burst into my room like she owned it. Her makeup was half smeared, eyes wild, phone in her fist. "What the hell did you do?" she barked. I didn't flinch. Told the truth. It wasn't addressed directly to me, just my name and our house number. "No, dear. No, a major brand just dropped me," she shouted. "Do you get that? They said I'm toxic by association. This was my career, Tiffany." "I didn't ruin your image," I said, calmly. "I just showed mine." Her face twisted. She stormed out and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The sound barely registered. I had already moved on. By the end of the week, the cracks in their world had turned into full-blown fractures. Vera and her husband, who I barely spoke to and rarely even acknowledged, had invested a large portion of their savings into Isolda's startup, a wellness brand, natural products, empowerment quotes, influencer partnerships. The moment the video went viral, the brand became a liability. Investors backed out. Affiliate partners pulled links. Their publicist dropped them. The website went offline within 48 hours. I found Vera in the kitchen one morning, her eyes puffy, hands trembling around a mug of tea. She wasn't crying for me. She never had. She was crying for the collapse of the empire they had built around Isolde, for the loss of the image, for the quiet shame that now whispered through the phone when old friends called. "We put everything into her," she said, not realizing I had entered the room. "Everything. And now it's all gone." I stood by the doorway. I didn't speak, because what was there to say? That she should have saved a little empathy for me? That all those years of telling me I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, had been projection? That all I ever wanted was to be seen? I didn't say any of it. Instead, I watched as her world, built on loyalty to one child and silence from the other, crumbled in real time. The neighborhood took notice, too. At first, it was subtle. The looks, the awkward greetings. Then came the podcast. A local host invited me to speak, just 10 minutes, she said, to talk about my experience as a patient who had been denied care by family decision. I agreed, not for revenge, for others like me. I told the story plainly, no embellishment, no drama, just facts. My voice was steady, my truth intact. That week, Vera received a letter from the school board. They were concerned about her ethics, her influence on young students, especially given the video's wide reach. She tried to brush it off, but I saw the shake in her hands when she read it. People stopped waving from their cars. The neighbor who always brought over zucchini bread in the summer now avoided our mailbox entirely. The isolation she had once buried me in had come for her, and I didn't have to lift a finger. When you bury your mistakes, I said during the podcast, sometimes they crawl back up, and when they do, they don't knock. They kick the door in. That Friday night, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and the street lamps buzzed on, Vera knocked on my door again. It wasn't the angry knock from days before. This one was hesitant, quiet. I opened it slowly. She looked exhausted, older. Her usual armor, lipstick, pearls, posture, was gone. "You've dismantled everything," she whispered. "No," I said. "You built it wrong. It collapsed on its own. You don't understand what you've started." "No," I said. "You don't understand what you tried to finish." She looked at me like she was seeing someone new, or maybe just someone she could no longer control. Then she turned and left. And for once, I didn't want apologies. I wanted consequences. The coffee had long gone cold by the time I realized I wasn't even drinking it. I just kept holding the mug in my hands like it grounded me, fingers wrapped tight, the ceramic a weight I could still control. My phone buzzed again, another notification, another message from a stranger who now knew more about my pain than the people who caused it. Not one of those messages was from my mother. Not a single one from Isolde. They had gone quiet. Maybe for the first time in their lives, they didn't know what to say. That afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. Vera's sharp, slanted script, always a little too controlled, a little too perfect. Love. Just clinical delivery. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, on a letterhead that belonged to her attorney's office. "We regret how things unfolded," it began. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I understand." Just a sterile acknowledgement, like she was checking a box on a list. "We hope in time you'll see it wasn't intentional harm. Families go through seasons. We're still family." That line stayed with me the longest. We're still family. I read the letter twice, folded it neatly, then slid it back into the envelope without a word. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had already said everything that mattered, and they hadn't listened. That night, I sat on my bed and called Vera. She answered on the third ring. I put her on speaker and hit record, something I had learned to do after too many conversations that later got twisted in someone else's retelling. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice tired. "Nothing," I replied. "That's the whole point now. You've made this so public. You've turned it into a spectacle." "No," I said evenly. "I turned it into evidence." There was a long pause. I could hear her inhale slowly, like she was preparing for something she didn't know how to say. "But we're your family," she finally whispered. "You were," I said. "Not anymore." I didn't hang up immediately. I let the silence linger, let her sit with it. The next week, I received an email from a women's advocacy organization. They'd seen the video, read the article, watched the podcast. They offered to sponsor the rest of my nursing degree, tuition, supplies, everything, no strings attached. I said yes without hesitation. They asked for my story. I sent them the documentation, hospital records, emails, the voicemail transcript. They compiled it all into a feature article titled, "The Cost of a Promise." It circulated quickly. People shared it with hashtags like #ChooseTheChild, Who Needs You, and #not just one daughter. And for the first time, my truth wasn't just mine. It belonged to people who had felt invisible, like I had. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they were too much or not enough. Later that month, Vera sent an invitation for dinner. Just the three of us. One last, sit down, she called it. No pressure. I went. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to finish the chapter on my own terms. When I arrived, the table was set with the same old floral plates we'd used since childhood. Isolde was already seated, scrolling her phone, barely looking up. She didn't say hello. Vera looked thinner, older. Her hair, once carefully blown out, now hung limp at her shoulders. Her eyes carried a weight I couldn't place. Regret, maybe, or just fatigue. We made it through 30 minutes of small talk. I didn't bring up the article. Neither did they. Then, without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small white envelope. I brought something, I said, placing it on the table between us. Vera stared at it, unsure. Isolde didn't look at it at all. Inside was a copy of the cancelled surgery invoice. I had written one sentence on the back. This was mine to carry, not yours to erase. I stood, pushed my chair back, and gathered my coat. As I reached the door, Vera called after me. Tiffany, she said softly, will we ever be a family again? I didn't turn around. We never were, I said. Not really. I drove west with the windows half down, the wind tugging at my sleeve, the single suitcase in the back seat bumping gently with every curve in the road. The acceptance letter sat folded on the passenger seat beside me, creased from rereading, marked in highlighter at the bottom where it read, Full tuition covered by independent donor. Maybe it should have felt like a miracle, but it didn't. It felt earned. Somewhere just past Spokane, I whispered to myself, maybe home isn't where you came from. Maybe it's what you build. Seattle greeted me with that quiet grayness it's known for, clouds hanging low, but not in a threatening way. I pulled into student housing near the university clinic and unpacked slowly, thoughtfully. For the first time, I didn't rush to hang pictures of anyone else. Instead, I framed a photo of me, just me, at the city park in Boise, laughing into a wind too strong for the moment. I didn't even remember who had taken it. A few days later, I met Dr. Lauren. She introduced herself with a handshake firm enough to mean something but not hard enough to challenge. She wore dark jeans and a navy blazer over a t-shirt that read, Patience over Politics. I watched your video, she said, offering me tea before I even sat down. I made the same mistake with my daughter. I've spent the last decade trying to make sure other women don't repeat mine. We talked for 2 hours, about health policy, about silence in families, about why some people call you strong just so they don't have to help. She offered to be my mentor on the spot. I won't push, she added, but if you let me, I'll walk beside you. As I left her office, I whispered under my breath, not all mothers look the same. Classes started a week later. It wasn't glamorous, early mornings, tough readings, long hours in the lab, but it was mine. I showed up early. I stayed late. I let myself be bad at some things, because I knew I'd get better. I decorated my dorm room simply. One poster, one small rug, a plant I named Fern because I thought naming something was the first step toward believing it deserved to live. And I started writing. Not a book, not a blog, letters. Letters I wish I'd received. One to myself at 14, scared in a hospital bed, wondering why no one came inside. One to myself at 20, shrinking into the back row of a graduation that didn't have my name on the program. One to my mother, never sent, ending only with, I stopped needing your apology the day I started living without it. A month into school, I got a call from the Washington State Public Health Association. They were hosting their annual summit and wanted me to speak during the closing session. We think your story is one people need to hear, the woman on the line said. We've titled your segment, Survival Isn't a Mistake. Would that be okay? I said yes. That Friday, I stood on stage under warm lights in a borrowed navy dress and a pair of flats I'd bought at Goodwill 2 years earlier. I didn't use a script, just a few bullet points scribbled on a note card. I told the room about sacrifice, about how families can hurt you most by pretending they didn't, about how being invisible isn't the same as being unworthy. And when I finished, they stood. Dr. Lauren handed me the award, a simple glass plaque etched with my name, and whispered, "You didn't just survive. You taught others how." I took it with both hands. I knew Vera and Isolde had watched online. I saw their names flash briefly in the live chat, then disappear. They didn't comment. They didn't have to. A few weeks later, a new envelope arrived in my Seattle mailbox. Her handwriting again. I held it for a full minute. Then I walked it to my closet, opened a small wooden box I'd labeled "Unspoken Doesn't Mean Unknown," and placed the letter inside, unopened, undisturbed. Some wounds are too deep for bandages, but they don't bleed forever. Late one afternoon, I walked the shoreline near Alki, the wind threading through my jacket, the salt sharp in the air. My phone buzzed, a message from someone I didn't know. "Because of your video, I stood up for myself." I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed. Then it was worth everything. Some wounds never get an apology. Some families never say "I'm sorry." But healing? Sometimes it comes when you stop waiting for permission and start building your own peace. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Your voice matters here.